So good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us this last day of September. Gosh, it's hard to believe. I can't believe October is actually tomorrow. My name's Christine Wheeler, and I'm with Newcastle Systems. And this collaboration with VDC Research has kind of been a long time coming. So I'm very pleased to share this unique data with you that analyzes the business impact of inefficient motion in the warehouse. If anytime during this session that we have, if you have any questions, I believe there's a Q&A button. Please feel free to submit your questions, and I'm hoping that we can get to all of them at the end. We'll have a wrap up with some Q&A. So now I will introduce Risha Gupta with VDC Research and Kevin Lidversis with Newcastle Systems that will be hosting this webinar.
Hello, everyone. My name is Richa Gupta, and I am a consultant in the Auto ID and data capture practice here at VDC Research. I have been with the firm since 2010 and have covered the global markets for barcode scanners, label printers, and machine vision solutions, among others. Kevin?
Yes, this is Kevin Lidversis, Director of Sales for Newcastle Systems. And Risha and I have known each other for many years. I come from the printing side of the AIDC space, and look forward to working on this project, as Christine mentioned, and uncovering some insight that I think all of you will hopefully appreciate today. So, Risha, I'll let you take it away.
Great. So during our presentation today, Kevin and I will be discussing findings from VDC's recently concluded market study, where we were looking to better understand warehousing workflow inefficiencies as a result of pressures relating to improving the overall speed, accuracy, and capacity in the warehouse. So we conducted an extensive primary research in support of the study, speaking to several warehouse technology investment decision makers and channel organizations with a significant warehousing presence. And as part of this presentation, we will also be talking about labeling errors resulting from these inefficiencies and how these organizations are really making these strategic investments in order to combat the same. Kevin will then talk about some real-world learnings from selling products directly to this community. And as a quick note here, you can download VDC's custom report on this topic by clicking on the link here on this slide. Now let's get started with a poll. Christine, can you start the poll, please?
Great. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and launch that. So it looks like our first question here, primary challenges faced by warehouse operators. If you could go in and select your top two, I'll give you about 30 seconds to get going with that.
Great. And while you're all answering this question, let me give you a bit of background into the warehouse-focused survey we conducted as part of this research. VDC asked a targeted list of highly qualified respondents about warehouse operational inefficiencies, their reasons for attrition, workflow allocation, and the associated metrics, and the technology investments to improve worker productivity. And we also had detailed conversations with solution providers, end user organizations about the key challenges, inefficiencies, and the drivers for technology investments. Looks like we are... Christine, let me know when the poll closes.
Yeah. I'm going to give it just probably a few more seconds here.
Looks like quite a few people are responding. So
yeah, it's good. Okay, so I am going to, we'll just share this out here. So I'll end the poll and I'm going to share the results.
Great. So it looks like we have the results to the poll. And 75% of you have indicated there's a high error incidence in picking, packing, and shipping. And 55% have talked about the inability to attract and retain workers. Now, these are certainly challenges that we will be discussing during the presentation today. Let me now show you. So I would like to now show you how the 160 odd respondents answered this question in our survey. And as you can see, workflow and workforce management and error incidents lead the challenges that warehouse operators face. And the COVID-19 pandemic has really resulted in a surge of online demand for all types of products, resulting in an accelerated growth of e-commerce channels, even as the global supply chains faced massive disruptions related to labor availability, and it just exacerbated the need to address customer requirements for increased fulfillment speeds, improved accuracy, and really managing the greater capacity. It's higher than ever before with this explosive growth in e-commerce sales volumes. And in one of the in-depth interviews that I conducted for this study, a Fortune 300 retailer shared applications such as validating receipts, sorting massive volumes of incoming shipment by various categories like color, size, etc., and ensuring received goods are appropriately categorized for further movement within the warehouse. These are applications that will continue to require significant manual labor and are not processes that are earmarked for automation today. So although automation is a central theme for most warehousing related conversations that you may be having, there are workflows that will continue to require manual control and intervention, for which access to large displays and industrial printers at the point of activity will be critical. And there's another very important point here, which I think the audience today really talked about as well, which is finding the right people and how critical it is to improving and optimizing warehousing productivity. However, given this industry's what is called disposable worker business model, hiring and more importantly, even retaining a qualified workforce is a significant challenge in this industry. And 1/3 of our survey respondents actually highlighted their inability to attract and retain warehouse workers. And at least one end user organization that I spoke to also mentioned labor crunch during the pandemic that had them reevaluate their processes in order to keep up with demand. This brings us to our next slide on warehouse workforce related challenges. There you go. Warehouse workers themselves, they're also facing challenges like insufficient resource allocation, non-optimized placement of workstations, which has them doing a lot of back and forth within warehouses that run into millions of square feet today. And also, during one of the interviews that I conducted, I learned about eye fatigue due to constantly staring at small screens, be it mobile computing devices or smaller screens that they have to look at in order to conduct their warehouse operations, all of which are contributing to attrition rates that are higher than in any other industry. Monthly attrition rates exceed 10% for nearly half the survey respondents, which is really significantly increasing the overall operational expenditures, because now you're talking about spending dollars to the tune of $5,000 to $10,000 to hire and train each warehouse worker, which adds up to a lot. And a leading AIDC channel company that we interviewed for this research also mentioned that the warehouse environments are currently struggling with an older workforce and are finding themselves unable to hire younger workers. Managers are faced with, again, a hiring crunch, which has prompted them to evaluate technology investments and monitor operational costs, including those associated with what we call inefficient motion, something that Newcastle Systems and Kevin obviously speak about on a daily basis. And relatively low hourly pay rates and intense workloads discourage the younger workforce from signing up for repetitive jobs. This is, the enormous strain on operations is really resulting in high error incidents, which is again highlighted by the audience today as a key issue in picking, packing, and shipping, and overall inefficiencies in operations. Now, speaking about inefficiencies, we want to, the whole conversation around workflow inefficiencies is central to this presentation today. I think since the pandemic, regular season has been as busy as, if not, busier than what has historically been associated with peak capacity at warehouses and fulfillment centers. And VDC really expects operational costs to increase exponentially if adjustments are not made to existing processes and workflows. The pressure of competing against someone like an Amazon is real. When they can ship most items in 2 days, if not the same day, it is really making it important for organizations of all sizes to get more products out of the door quicker. Order picking, packing, shipping, and receiving have been highlighted in our research as the most inefficient processes by our survey respondents, with the leading factors contributing to inefficiencies being, like you can see in this chart, walking to workstations to retrieve relevant information, suboptimal inventory stocking, etc. And the exposure to this possibility of errors is only increasing given the demands placed on supply chains and warehouse operators. Kevin, I don't know if you had anything to share from your customer conversations around this exposure to an increase in the errors that warehouse operators are experiencing today because of escalated order volumes, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. If you think about a typical process, say a receiving process, where maybe they're printing 1,000 labels a day, and now their business doubles or even triples, that added volume just increases the risk of applying the wrong label to the wrong product. And this slide really tells the story that I've been seeing for years in warehouses, and that is that they're trying to reduce the touches, because anytime you touch a product, it hurts your margin. So handling is a big problem. Paperwork, you'd be shocked at how many people still, regardless that RF guns and technology have been around for so many years, so many people still are using paper-based picking systems, extremely manual. And that's really hard, especially if you're doing eaches or single line items in an e-commerce space. And a lot of people got thrown into that space last year because their business model changed. They had to become efficient in e-commerce. They had no experience, and then they were realizing it was really difficult. And then, yes, last but not least, we focus on walking, but it's not just us. I mean, if you look at the robotics companies, AGV companies, they're all focusing on reducing footsteps. And when you can't get people, and you certainly, if you're having trouble retaining people, you've got to get better and reduce the travel time. And yeah, label data is critical. If you don't label it properly on the inbound side, you often see it gets picked wrong, and then and eventually it gets shipped wrong. And then the customer has a bad experience, which is what they're all trying to avoid.
Right. And which is why it is so important to equip all these associates or warehouse workers with the right tools required right at the point of activity, be it the shipping or receiving docs or whatever workflow they're currently undertaking, in order to make that relevant data or information immediately accessible, to Kevin's point. And I think it is important to highlight another statistic here as we move on to the slide, which is according to data published by the National Safety Council, which is a nonprofit safety advocate, 74% of employers underestimate the prevalence of fatigue in the workforce. VDC believes that unnecessary movement and inefficient motion within the warehouse not only add to the hours of work, but also contribute to worker fatigue and therefore mislabeling and errors, all of which add to overall costs. Again, just citing what Kevin just said, impacting the bottom line as well as the profitability. And as you can see on the statistic that is displayed on this slide, 35% of the warehouse operators that we surveyed cited that the workstations are not optimally placed for worker use. And that's one of the primary challenges that they're facing. So these workstations are typically equipped with monitors, printers, and scanners. And managers feel compelled to have their associates for these workflows undertake batch printing, since the workstations and therefore the printers are not easily accessible from wherever it is that they are conducting labeling processes or whatever is the point of activity, essentially. And warehouse managers that we spoke to as well mentioned that workers need to spend hours at staging locations at the center of the warehouse for data entry and label printing applications. And they typically create and print labels in dedicated office spaces, which leads to a significant increase in errors and places undue stress on associates, because now they have to move back and forth from the point of labeling itself. Now, this brings us to the next question, Christine.
All right. So I'm going to, go to the next one. So launch that. So just if you could tell us, what is the percentage of orders in your facility, if you know, that you typically ship with accurate barcode labels on the product?
And while the audience really answers this question, Kevin, let me ask you this. What are you hearing from your customers and partners on labeling accuracy? I mean, obviously VDC has a lot of research to share on this, but what are you hearing from them?
It's a bigger problem than I quite honestly ever even realized until I started getting involved in this product and visiting customers, and it affects. It could be as simple as a manufacturing company that's making a food product, and they mislabel inbound ingredients, and those ingredients end up in a vat, which has just made thousands of dollars worth of material they now have to throw away. It can affect the outbound side, where people are putting the wrong labels on the wrong package that ends up with the wrong customer. That's very common. And on the inbound side, they just mislabel the item and it gets put away to the wrong location, believing it's what it is. And then a picker goes to get it, ends up at the wrong customer. And so we see this all the time. And in certain industries like automotive and medical and food, you really cannot have errors. I mean, some of it can be catastrophic in the auto industry. There's some very heavy fines levied. So it's a problem. And I just think until it happens, people don't even look at it. And that's really one of the issues.
Right. And do you want to end the poll?
Yeah, I'm going to end it right now and share the results.
Again, I think what is staggering is the percent of respondents, even to, from the registrants to this webinar, who have indicated that not, 100% of their orders shipped with accurate barcode labels. Is less than 97% for a significant majority. And that's something that has resonated in our survey as well. Printing significant volumes of barcode labels is a critical requirement in most warehouses, and there's a massive disparity in the warehouse performance metrics of e-commerce giants when you look at a Walmart or an Amazon, and that of small and medium-sized businesses. So the latter are really struggling to remain competitive with key order fulfillment benchmarks of the perfect order, if you will. VDC believes that while the top 1% of these organizations have successfully driven down error rates to less than 1%, majority of the businesses today continue to struggle with improving labeling accuracy, order fulfillment statistics, and overall efficiencies. Our research shows that average labeling error rates stand at just over 3%, and this is due to a variety of reasons, be it incorrect data on labels due to workers having to, again, walk to and fro, back and forth from printers and workstations, inconsistent labeling processes across the workforce, and also manual spot checking processes at various touch points. And more than half the survey respondents indicated that their workers need to walk more than 3 times per day to specific printers during an 8-hour shift to gain access to documents and labels required to support various warehouse workflows. All this leads to more labeling errors. Now, Kevin, before I talk about some of our research statistics associated with warehouse technology investment drivers, I would like to ask you what you're hearing from your customers on the benefits and the overall importance of automation.
Well, I mean, in some cases, automation is fantastic, but as you've mentioned, it doesn't solve every problem. I mean, there are one-offs, there are processes that have to have some type of manual input, right? And that's kind of where we fit. We're sort of semi-manual, but I see companies expanding like crazy right now into robotics, handling systems, AGVs. It's just, a lot of it is just out of necessity. I mean, if you are growing at a rapid pace and you need more capacity, but you don't have people and can't get people to handle that capacity, then you have to either do it with technology, automation, or process improvement. And some companies have large budgets and can easily roll out the automation side. They have staffing to support that as well. But, to your point, the small to mid-sized company may not have that. And so they've got to be a little more creative as to how they grow. And that's why process improvement and technology like AIDC is affordable. And that's why their business is growing so fast as well, because it's a pretty simple solution to help people adapt and grow in this space.
Right, and thank you. That actually speaks to a point I was just going to make. Our research shows that there is a certain level of hesitancy for the more expensive solutions, given the upfront investment costs and the prolonged ROI timeframes or time to impact timeframes. Warehouse operators highlighted that they are particularly sensitive to these investments not exceeding their prescribed budgets, and are keen on solutions that have a low time to impact. So that really speaks to what you just shared as well. And 60% of decision makers that we surveyed expect their warehouse sizes to trend up significantly over the next 3 years. which will accelerate the need to find the cost savings that they're looking for from these warehousing operations in order to accommodate this significant surge in both scale as well as function. They are considering technology investments to increase efficiencies, the overall productivity, increase speed of delivery, picking and stocking, minimize errors and return rates, and also lower fatigue for warehouse workers. And the cost of losing workers, like we discussed before, is, it's just stifling, which makes it important for organizations to invest in solutions that adequately address their requirements for measurable as well as substantial productivity gains. Now, this is in terms of, not only labor cost related savings, but also seeing an uptick in orders fulfilled per day, the overall reduction in workforce fatigue, which is real, and a drop in labeling errors and inaccuracies. And 80% of the organizations with current or planned investments in mobile-powered workstations, from the ones that we surveyed, expect lower error incidents by writing off batch printing. Based on what we've heard from businesses with existing deployments and also leading AIDC channel organizations that we spoke to that sell these powered carts, they provide access to print output directly at the points of operation, eliminating the need to retrieve the same from distributed locations, making the workers walk back and forth within these large warehouses. And nearly all of VDC's survey respondents indicated interest in mobile-powered workstations that can help workers take the relevant tools, be it laptops with at least one full-screen monitor, printers, scanners, wherever they go within the warehouse. And one end-user organization that I spoke with indicated that it has been able to eliminate the need for batch printing and having to go back and forth between workstations because label printing for them is now a dynamic on-demand process, which is, again, the way things are moving. And the organization has also seen an increase in the number of printers across each of its facilities since its investments in powered carts to support worker operations. It's not like their printer investments are dropping by any means, they're going up, but at the same time, they're now able to strategically place them and enable their workers to take them with them to their points of activity. Kevin, I know you have a lot to say about the workflow inefficiencies that your products bring about. So over to you.
Thanks, Risha. Yeah, thanks for sharing your research. And so if you look at this picture, a lot of what we've talked about is motion in general. The picture on the left is a tool we use called spaghetti diagram. And really, if you take your staff and you draw lines throughout their footsteps throughout the day, and you kind of watch it, you can see that in some companies that really aren't efficient, there are lines all over the place. And in this situation, this is a receiving application. And this is very common. We see this all the time where people are leaving their space to go retrieve labels. And as Risha mentioned, what happens, oftentimes they sort of game the system. They don't want to make those trips. Because one thing I've learned over the years is that most people want to do a good job, right? They want to work and they want to be productive. So eventually they start to sort of game the system and they'll start printing multiple orders and printing batches. And that's when you get inaccuracies. And it's going to happen that if you print multiple orders and they all look the same, say a 4x6 label, you're going to end up on the wrong item, either coming in or going out. So if your process looks a little bit like the left, where people are walking back and forth to retrieve paperwork and labels, you may be having issues that you want to take care of. Now, that time, the elapsed time that is taking right there is really what hurts people's KPIs as well. And we see applications where people are spending as much as half the day, 4 hours, literally, walking. And these are really successful companies that have industrial engineers measure this. And they're shocked, as we are no longer shocked, but we used to be many years ago. But they don't look at things like, I always say walking is something that you just don't notice. It's so commonplace that you assume if somebody's walking, they must be working. But it's sort of like the old adage, you just don't see what you don't see. And that's kind of how how the whole walking thing transposes itself in warehouses. And so when you go to the picture on the right and you start labeling at the point of activity, you're receiving, you're applying labels one at a time, product actually starts to move and flow a lot better because you get product off the dock much quicker. And by that, it could be as much as 50% to 100% faster. So if you're trying to be a competitor in the e-commerce space, You really need to be getting stuff off your dock and processed and received in less than 8 hours. And we've had customers with things sitting on their dock for days. If their dock, if they're really slow at their process and they have a lot of motion, plus some other things, it gets very congested and their metrics start to suffer. And then they can't get product put away fast enough. And the whole flow of the distribution center is slower than it needs to be. So it's all about flow. If you have speed, that creates flow and that creates capacity. And that's what really a lot of people have to strive for if they want to compete in the e-commerce space. If you can index the next slide, please. And so when we think of walking, it is a really complex problem that millions and millions of dollars is being spent to fix it right now. Risha talked about automation. And the picture on the right is a company called Logos Robotics. And there are other players. Zebra just purchased Fetch Robotics, Six Rivers, et cetera. It's a growing segment. If you go to Modex next year, I will probably see 4 or 5 new companies I had never heard of. And the reason is it is a huge problem. When you can't get people, and this is specifically a picking application. Picking represents about half the labor cost in a distribution center. So if those people had to pick those boxes to a cart and bring them back to a pack station multiple times every day, that travel time would just hamper their business and it would really hurt their flow. And so what Logos Robotics do, they take all the travel time away. Collaborative robots are great for picking applications. They come to the worker places the unit onto the bot goes back, it takes away all the travel time. And when you think about it, we're sort of doing the same thing. The picture on the left is somebody using our product. They're using the same stock issued orange vest. They're processing something at the source or the point of activity. They're eliminating all those footsteps. And when you do that, we have seen people gain as much as 200 to 300% productivity. Just depends on how much motion is involved in their process. So think about motion in general. Start keeping your eyes open, measure it, look at it, and start maybe seeing how, if you could eliminate that, what would your business look like? Next slide. And mathematically, this is something that we did many years ago. I had an industrial engineer, a large retail distribution company, share sort of the steps and of a typical receiving process. And so yours maybe look a little different, but typically there are always going to be some tasks that are necessary, like printing labels. And there's also going to be some value-added steps you're doing. And that's going to move your product closer to your customer. Anytime barcode scanning is involved, it's a good thing, right? But it's the circles with the little lines going through them, the waste. Those are the things that really hamper your speed and your process, right? So if you look at this process, it's about 21 minutes to do a receipt, we'll call it. 12 steps are involved. And many of them are waste. And so if we go to the next slide and we eliminate that waste, we cut the time in half. And that's very common. We have often seen people say, I've cut my dock to stock time in half. I've doubled my outputs of receipts. And it's simply because they are now picking up an extra 4 hours a day they never knew they had. Now, not everybody's going to pick up 4 hours, but on a general basis, you're going to pick up between 15 to 20 minutes an hour in most cases, regardless of how well laid out your dock is. That's pretty much going to be guaranteed, because if they were taking any steps right now to go and retrieve paperwork, they're doing that multiple times per order. And those things add up faster than people realize. And that's kind of what the engineers had taught me over the years, is that when you really measure things, it's a little bit, it's concerning, right? And there's so much of this going on in most companies because they're just doing things as they've always done them, and haven't really taken the time to map out that process. So that's a pretty common study right there. If you go to the next slide, we have a great tool that is free for anybody to download. It's called Motion Meter. It's available for iPhones and Android devices, and it allows you to measure really any process, picking, shipping, it doesn't matter. You customize it to sort of play into your business and to represent your process. And use it, it creates a report. You can actually get a great idea as to what this is all costing you. And then we also have an ROI calculator on our website. It's very simple, but just remember, I mean, if you can save 10 minutes an hour, that represents like a week a year. And when you can't get people, there's no way you can afford to have somebody wasting literally a week, a year, just walking. But I would probably challenge you that 10 minutes is on the low side. So use these two tools to make yourself more productive, start looking at motion in a different light, And if you do, and you can just strip out even 20, 30, 40% of it, you're going to be a lot better off for 2022.
Thanks, Kevin. I think it all comes down to helping these businesses see quantifiable benefits, like you said, be it more shipping or more picking, and bringing the warehouse worker closer to the actual work itself. Warehouse operators can be flexible and scalable, like one of the AIDC channel organization that I spoke with said, by taking a modular approach to how they build and extend workstations. And I would like to quickly highlight some of the key points communicated to me during my conversations with mobile workstation customers and partners as part of this research study. So along with bringing the worker closer to the actual point of actual work, it also makes available the full suite of warehouse control systems and warehouse management systems available to the decision maker right where they need it. They're able to really take all the relevant devices with them where required, like your image showed. Per our survey research, like I said, that's a laptop, at least one large screen or monitor, a label printer, and barcode scanner. And some of the other points on this slide I've already discussed in detail during this presentation, like the ability to alleviate worker fatigue due to scale back walking time. That's central to the research that we did with Newcastle Systems as well, talking about how inefficient motion leads to fatigue, leads to attrition. And how that can be scaled back because of investments in relevant technology solutions and the availability of the detailed information and insights that the worker needs or that the decision maker really needs right where they need them. And this brings us to the end of our presentation. I would like to, maybe take a moment here to talk about my firm, VDC Research. We've been in business for 50 years now, offering our clients a very broad range of services, including market intelligence and opportunity assessment, strategy consulting, and thought leadership. We have a very well-established roster of clients, both big and small, that continue to make significant investments in our market research and consulting services across various practice areas, including auto ID and data capture, of which I'm a part. Kevin, anything to share about Newcastle Systems?
Yeah, thanks for all your great work on this project, Risha. Mobile workstations, if you think about this product, it's a little under the radar because, again, most people aren't looking at walking or motion in general. So I'd challenge you to kind of take a look at something you hadn't done so in the past, because the people who use these are a who's list of really successful process-driven companies. And they're driving really as much waste out of their process as they can to extract efficiencies. And if you're struggling right now with capacity, accuracy, speed, getting labor, all the things that we've been hearing for years, you might want to take a look at the inbound and the outbound side to start and see how much motion and what it's costing you with the tools we offered. And the ROI on these products are pretty much in the 3 to 6 month range. And that includes AIDC devices. So if you're on the IT side of the equation here, and you've got some legacy devices that you need upgraded, this is a great way to get them, get them into a more current model, put them on wheels, and then you extract all that value out and you pay for everything in a really short period of time. So we're here to help. So if you have any questions, you know how to get a hold of us, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Christine, looks like we have time for some questions right now.
Sure.
Are there any that have come in?
Yeah, let me see here. Yeah, there's actually a couple that we've got. So one that is asking, so I think this would probably be for you, Risha, but Kevin, you can certainly join in or chime in. So in terms of the research that you've done, what do you see as the leading contributors to warehouse workflow issues or the inefficiencies?
So order picking and packing, shipping and receiving, these were the workflows that were really highlighted as the most inefficient processes within a warehouse. And the primary factors that were contributing to inefficiencies within these workflows were primarily, again, suboptimal inventory stocking. I think Kevin spoke about the over-reliance on paper-based processes that stood out. labeling errors and inaccuracies related to barcode labeling. And again, walking to workstations to retrieve relevant information, having to walk back and forth. And these were all areas of waste that they encountered, inefficient motion, being flagged as one of them, which is really central to the research that we were doing here. Kevin, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I've been hearing over this, even if you go to the trade shows and just kind of look at the data that's out there, the motion side of this business is becoming more critical because, again, if you can't get people and you're growing and you're wasting 2 to 3, 4 hours a day, the only way you can solve this is if somehow you can take a product and move it from point A to point B, and that requires a lot of money. That's where automation is fantastic, but it only really helps the largest enterprise level companies that can support it and have the funds to do that. And that's why looking at the process and some basic technology and reduce those steps, that's really key to a lot of people's survival going forward.
Great. I have a couple more here that have come in. So, a lot of this has been talked about, inefficient motion or, obviously wasted motion, but what other areas of waste does a warehouse encounter?
I think, to me, Christine, I would say touches for one thing. It's handling. I mean, if you look at a box as it comes in, a low margin item, we'll say, in an e-commerce site, if you're touching that thing multiple times, then you're going to lose money eventually. And that's why it's so important to have great processes and try to eliminate touches. And the other thing is paper. It's surprising to me. I think the last statistic I saw was about 30% of warehouses still rely on paper. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be really hard to compete with companies as they advance and grow and use technology to their advantage. And you're going to get left behind if you're still using paper to, batch process things. Your speed just won't be there. And if you think about e-commerce, people are expecting things now in a matter of days. And so if you have a process where things are sitting on the dock for days, you're already behind the curve. And I just see that pressure getting more and more as time goes on, where people are going to start demanding things even faster. And so systems have to be in place to make sure that they can support those demands. And that's going to require people to get away from paper faster than maybe they even want to.
Yeah, I was going to highlight paper-based processes as well, as the area of waste right now, especially when you have so many device alternatives that you can make investments in. But at the same time, I think it's about the price point that these devices are available at, which may not always be conducive for warehouse operators to make such investments in the first place. But certainly paper-based processes, not only is it an area of waste in the sense that Kevin spoke about it, but also in terms of the errors that they cause and the labeling related inaccuracies that you see because of over-reliance on paper-based processes.
All right. This one is kind of I think that there's a lot of probably answers to this one, but I'll throw this out. I think we have time for one more. So this is from the pandemic impact on warehouse operations from your standpoint of order fulfillment accuracy.
So let me take this first, Kevin, maybe.
Sure.
So, the pandemic has really, it has led to, like we discussed, scaled back resources in warehouses. And there's a lot of pressure on workers to do the job faster, while at the same time, warehouse operators are being forced to work with, our survey showed 85 to 95% of their typical workforce strength. This has an impact on overall accuracies, overall KPIs and metrics that they are really tracking as well. And there's no, single answer to what the level of accuracy is or how much of it has been affected. There's order accuracy, processing times, receiving times, the picking and packing rates. All of this has been affected because of the number of workers being lower than what the warehouse operators were used to. So because of which error incidences, and the likelihood of error incidents is really, just going up. So it really depends on the strategic investments that these warehouses are making right now in order to make sure that they are able to keep up with demand, while at the same time, they're not adversely impacted by the number of workers that are working at any given time within their warehouse locations.
Great. All right. Well, it seems to me, it looks like we've got, I think we're ready to wrap up then. So I think I want to thank everybody again. I mean, I know that there's a lot of webinars. I know it's a very busy time. It's the end of the month. We're obviously hitting peak season, so we appreciate the time people have taken to listen to this. You can download the VDC custom report. I think if you click the link there, I will also be sending out these slides, and we'll resend the custom report to you. But just wanted to thank you for your time, and we appreciate it, and have a great rest of the year.
Thank you.
Thank you.